In 2025, the top 20 football clubs in the world generated over 12 billion euros in combined revenue, more than at any point in the history of the sport. Record matchday earnings, record broadcast deals, record commercial partnerships, and UEFA still expects the total pre-tax losses across European football in the same year to reach 1.3 billion euros. Chelsea lost 407 million euros in a single season, the largest pre-tax loss in English football history. Manchester United posted a net loss despite earning £666 million in revenue. Barcelona is yet to offload the 2.42 billion euros in total debt. How does an industry generating 12 billion euros a year lose over a billion of it simultaneously? The answer is not what you think, and it is hidden in a number entry that most football fans have never heard of. Let's establish something important before we go any further. The clubs losing money are not poorly run businesses stumbling towards bankruptcy. Most of them are generating more revenue than at any point in their existence. Manchester United earned a record £666.5 million in 2024-25, in a season where they finished 15th in the Premier League with no Champions League football. Barcelona brought in €994 million in the same period, just £6 million short of their own €1 billion milestone. So this is not a revenue problem. These clubs are earning more than they ever have. The problem is structural, and it operates at the cost side of the balance sheet through three distinct mechanisms that compound on each other year after year. The first is wage inflation that consistently outpaces revenue growth. The second is transfer fee amortization building up into a cumulative accounting charge that clubs cannot escape without selling players. And the third, the one that almost nobody explains properly, is the debt service cost on stadium and infrastructure projects that quietly consumes operating profit before anyone even gets to the transfer budget. Together, these three mechanisms create a structural gap between what clubs earn and what they spend. And right now, in 2025-26, that gap is wider than at any point in the modern era, even as revenues set new records every single year. So how does each of these three accounting layers continue to cripple the world's biggest football clubs? Start with wages, because wages are where the structural problem lives. In 2025, PSG's total staff costs were €668 million, Real Madrid's were €505 million, Manchester City's were €480 million. Those are not anomalies, they are the new normal for elite football, and they represent a problem that no amount of revenue growth fully solves. Here is why. Player wages in elite football are negotiated upward at contract renewal but almost never negotiated downward. A player who signs a 5-year deal at a peak wage locks in that cost for the duration of his contract regardless of the club's commercial performance, regardless of the team's league position, and regardless of whether the player maintains his peak output. There is no performance-indexed wage adjustment built into standard football contracts. The wage is guaranteed. That means when Manchester United finished 15th in the Premier League with no Champions League football in 2024-25, their wage bill barely moved, yet their broadcasting revenues fell by tens of millions because they were out of European competition. Their total operating expenses were £733.6 million against revenues of £666.5 million. The costs exceeded the revenues by £67 million before a single transfer fee was accounted for. Chelsea's wage-to-revenue ratio in 2024-25 was 76%, against UEFA's recommended ceiling of 70%. Their combined wages and operating costs hit £605 million against revenues of just £491 million, and that is before their player amortization charge is even added. This is the accounting mechanism that most people underestimate, and it is the engine underneath the biggest losses in football right now. When a club pays a transfer fee, that fee is capitalized as an intangible asset and spread as an annual amortization charge across the player's contract. If you pay £60 million for a player on a 6-year deal, you book £10 million per year in amortization costs. That is not a cash payment leaving the bank every year. It is an accounting charge that sits on the income statement and reduces your reported profit. But it is real, it accumulates, and once a club starts spending heavily on transfers, those charges stack up year after year and become almost impossible to reduce without aggressively selling players. Chelsea's player amortization charge in their 2023-24 UEFA filing was £190 million and was expected to be even higher in 2024-25. On revenues of £491 million, that is a 38.7% revenue charge just to service the accounting cost of past transfers, before wages, before operating costs, before anything else. And here is where a regulatory change made everything worse. Before the 2023-24 season, both UEFA and the Premier League introduced a rule capping transfer amortization at 5 years, regardless of how long a player's actual contract runs. Chelsea regularly signed players on 6, 7 or even 8-year contracts, partly to spread the amortization charge and reduce the annual accounting impact. The rule change closed that door. Any contract beyond 5 years now gets amortized at the 5-year rate, meaning the same transfer fee generates a larger annual accounting charge than the club originally planned for. As an accountant, this regulatory change was a quiet earthquake in club balance sheets, and I have not seen it explained clearly in mainstream football coverage once. It is one of the direct reasons Chelsea's losses escalated so dramatically in 2024-25. The third mechanism is the most hidden, and for Barcelona, it is the most devastating. Barcelona spent the 2022-2025 period pulling what they called economic levers, selling a combined 25% stake in their domestic TV rights to raise cash, raising approximately €850 million in total through various asset monetization deals. They needed this money because the renovation of Camp Nou, their home stadium, is projected to cost somewhere between €1.5 billion and €1.8 billion before it is finished. To finance the actual construction, they took on billions in external debt. Barcelona's total debt as of the end of 2024-25 stands at €2.42 billion. The annual interest charge on that debt is now approximately €27 million and growing. In 2024-25, Barcelona recorded a €79 million financial burden total, the single biggest line item on their income statement, that consumed their entire operating profit and then some, producing a net loss of €17 million despite €994 million in revenues. They earned nearly €1 billion and still lost money, not because they spent recklessly on players, but because the interest payments on their construction debt now structurally exceed their operating profitability in any normal trading year. Manchester United face a structurally similar problem from a different source. Their net debt is now above $1 billion, the highest level since the Glazer family's leveraged buyout in 2005. The debt service cost from that legacy ownership structure has drained hundreds of millions from the club's investing capacity over 2 decades. United earned record revenues in 2024-25 and still posted a £33 million net loss. Here is what everyone gets wrong about why football's biggest clubs are losing money. The losses are not a sign that these clubs are in financial distress. For most of them, the losses are the deliberate, predictable output of a cost model specifically designed to win trophies in the short term while deferring the financial consequences into future accounting periods. Chelsea have spent over £1.5 billion on transfers since Todd Boehly's consortium took over in 2022. The majority of those transfer fees are sitting on the balance sheet as intangible assets, being amortized at £190 million per year. That strategy will only produce a profitable club when they sell enough players at a profit to offset the amortization charge. In 2024-25, they generated approximately £300 million from outgoing transfers. That sale activity is not a commercial success story. It is a structural necessity to stay FFP compliant and avoid deeper losses. Barcelona's lever strategy raises the same question. They raised €850 million by monetizing future TV rights. But those rights, the future income they sold, are no longer on their balance sheet. When those deals expire, the club will earn less from TV rights than a club that never sold them. They brought forward tomorrow's income to fund today's spending. Their current €2.42 billion debt and €27 million annual interest charge is the direct accounting consequence of that decision. The real reason nobody fully explains this is that the clubs themselves do not want it explained. The language they use, economic levers, strategic investment phase, one-off impairments, is specifically designed to make structural losses sound like temporary adjustments. But UEFA's aggregate data does not lie. $1.3 billion in combined losses across European football in 2025, in the same year that collective revenues broke €12 billion for the first time. The gap between revenue and profit is not narrowing, it is holding. So these clubs are not failing. They are operating exactly as their cost models predict. The question is whether the model is sustainable, and the €12 billion revenue number suggests the answer is yes, just barely, and only for the biggest clubs in the system. If you found this European football club financial breakdown story interesting, you will absolutely be fascinated by this next video where I break down why Liverpool's Klopp era was a financial masterclass. Click it and I'll see you there. Cheers.